justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding. We, thine unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the king, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Call of the roll? No. This honorable House now resumes its sitting. Call of the roll?
Mrs. Holness, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Mallow-Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Ms. Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown-Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mrs. Mallow-Fort, Mr. Montague, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Chuck, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Mr. Wheatley, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright. Yeah, man, okay. Mr. Brown. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you very much. This afternoon, I would like to welcome everyone who has joined us this evening, those who are here with us, and those who are in the galleries, those watching online. And I want to extend a very, very special welcome to two persons who have joined us in this speaker's well this afternoon. And they are it is His Excellency Fermin Quinones Sanchez, the Ambassador of the Republic of Cuba to Jamaica, and his assistant who is here with him. We are particularly delighted to have him. I know he feels and knows he's at home with friends, and we are happy always to have him with us as a friend to the Parliament and to the people of Jamaica. Members, just before we begin our sitting this evening, I want this afternoon to make reference to a ruling that was made yesterday that has aroused much discussion, and to clearly state the position that I took as the chair and the basis on which the position was taken. It relates to the questions that were in the name of the member from Southeast St. Andrew to the Prime Minister. The Minister of Information, the Honorable Mr. Morgan, stood to respond to the questions, and there were objections raised from the opposition. I am now referring to, and the member has joined us, member from Southeast St. Andrew. I am referring to our discussions that we had yesterday in relation to the question standing in your name to the Prime Minister, which the Minister of Information answered yesterday. When one looks at the standing orders, subsection 3, it states very clearly that the person in whose name the question is standing, and yesterday that person was the member from Southeast St. Andrew, can ask someone to deputize for him in his absence. This section, however, does not relate at all to the minister who is to answer. And I have gone right through the standing orders, and I have read Mays, and both the standing orders and Erskine Mays is silent on whether or not the minister can deputize, have someone deputize for him in the answering. However, the matter yesterday was resolved because when the Minister of Information rose to answer the question, the member from Southeast St. Andrew beckoned and inquired if there were printed copies of the answers, to which, as a speaker, I referred to the minister. He said, yes, he had copies. The orderly went across, took the copies, and not just one copy, took the copies from the minister and handed it to the member along with other members of the opposition. It is therefore a clear indication from the member of the opposition that he accepted the answers coming from the minister who was answering the questions. And I want to reiterate that prior to that, I had referred the member to 17.9 and asked him on more than one occasion, did he wish to withdraw the question or to postpone them? And he did not desire to do any of those things. In fact, he at one point said, don't put it in my mouth because I'm not withdrawing it. And on that basis, I thought it is important in the interest of all of us as parliamentarians to state the basis on which the ruling was made and to state clearly that the answers were given in keeping with what took place. There was nothing wrong with it. I have had discussions with the leader of opposition business, and we have decided that we are going to call a meeting of the Standing Orders Committee to look in depth at the provisions as it relates to this. But the ruling that was given yesterday was based on the acceptance of the member in whose name the question stood from Southeast St. Andrew. He asked for the responses, the answers, he received them, and therefore the questions were properly answered. Thank you.
Can I speak, Madam Speaker? And I think the records must accurately reflect what took place. I made it very clear to you that I did not agree with your ruling. But in this Parliament, your ruling is final. Your ruling is final, but I made it clear I did not agree with it. The fact that I asked the member for copies does not mean that I agree that he should answer the questions. You made a ruling that he was going to answer the questions, and he got up to answer, and I said, where are the copies? So you cannot use me asking for the copies to mean that I gave consent for him to answer instead of the Prime Minister. I was very clear. I did not agree with your interpretation nor your ruling. But in this House, your ruling is final. And I'm not going to be in contempt of your ruling. But I said I would not withdraw because I wanted the answers. But I said I believed you were wrong in the way you ruled. So I do not want what you represent, that my asking for copies means that I was given my authority for him to answer on behalf of the Prime Minister. No. The fundamental point here is that questions must be answered by the person who the questions are directed to. Now, if there is an extenuating circumstance that the person is off the island or ill, then that's a different matter. But the Prime Minister was in the House. He spoke addressing the death of the Queen. He was here. It can't be. The Standing Orders does not contemplate a minister deferring questions because he doesn't want to answer them. And that is what took place. So I just want to make my position clear. I accepted the answers because you gave a ruling. And I asked for copies because you said the Minister of Information would answer on behalf of the Prime Minister. And I made it clear I did not agree with your ruling.
Madam Speaker, with your leave.
Allow me, please, Minister. Minister, I'm going to give you the advice I gave the leader of the opposition yesterday. You have someone with far more experience than you have or I have sitting to your right. And you must listen very carefully to what I said. I repeated exactly what Hansard has, and I also repeated the fact that I said to you 3 times, based on section 17, subsection 9, what do you wish to do? To withdraw the question or to have them postponed? You said you were not going to have them postponed. And if you did not accept it, the English language is clear. All you had to do was to say, Madam Speaker, I will have the questions postponed for when the minister. You did not. Your next answer was, are the copies for the answers available? At which time I asked the minister who was answering, does he have copies? And they were given to you. You had an option. If you were not aware of it, I repeated it to you 3 times yesterday. I ruled for the minister to answer the questions. I asked you thrice, will you postpone it as this standing orders allows or withdraw? You had a choice. You did not exercise that choice. You chose to have the questions answered, which is exactly what took place.
Madam Speaker, just as a point of clarity, please, if you would give me leave. The statement was made by the member that the Prime Minister was in the precincts of the House. That is not correct. At the time when the questions were to be answered, we can check the Hansard. No, you weren't clear, and I want to make it clear for the record. It's a very important point. Very important point. He was here earlier, but at the point of the question, he was not here. We do not wish for you to conflate things like that. We want the clarity and we want the facts to be established on Hansard. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker, firstly, let me thank you for the discussions we were able to have just prior to the start of the meeting, which discussions are really incomplete because of the time limit. The first point I wish to make, Madam Speaker, is that when contentious issues arise in the House, I think it will suit the House, suit you as the presiding officer, to sometimes just pause for advice from counsel. As you know, we as lawyers, when we are on our feet, things are swirling around us, but we do need to get the best advice. And I think in such an instance as yesterday, it would have been appropriate if there is a pause so that you can consult with the clerk and, of course, legal counsel. Because, just to be fair to the member, the issue started with a discussion on 17.3. And I think in the dynamics that took place, where we were contending that 17.3 doesn't allow the answerer to depute to somebody the answers. That was the main issue. And you're having acknowledged that it was not really a correct interpretation. The member, having heard your ruling, proceeded on that basis. And the only way, if there is a challenge, that can be resolved by Hansard. But I think we just have to be clear on the sequence. And as I pointed out, and as I have been pointing out continually, the person who asks the question is in charge thereof. Whether or not there is going to be an extension, whether or not, and I acknowledge that there is silence on the part of the issue as to whether or not the minister can depute it, but it always has to come back to the questioner. Madam Speaker, you and I have agreed that we now have to have an urgent meeting of the Standing Orders Committee to deal with the issue of a minister seeking to deputize, because that to me is certainly not permissible unless the questioner has given approval to that. Madam Speaker, I also want to, as I mentioned earlier, to give notice that as of next month, we do intend to utilize provisions under the standing orders to deal with Prime Minister's question time, which allows for the Prime Minister to be asked questions on the second Tuesday of the month, to which questions he has to answer, and also 17.3, which provides for Minister's question time where matters of urgent national importance can be addressed through your leave for ministers to answer questions on their feet, and in which case no deputization can take place, and it is provided for in the standing orders. Finally, Madam Speaker, I think ministers need to appreciate that this is the highest court of the land. It is much higher than your regular court. So when a minister comes to answer questions, all the issues relating to truthfulness, completeness arise. And a minister who is not complete by your determination can be found to be in contempt of the Parliament. I am stating those principles. And those principles... I am not... I'm not referring to yesterday. Yes. I am not referring to yesterday. I'm referring to principles that ought to abide. That ought to abide. And, Madam Speaker, you have, as you know, tremendous powers in relation to questions and answers. So I just want to put those as we anticipate the urgent meeting on this matter.
I thank you very much, House Leader, and I want to say I stand firmly by the ruling. I have on my phone the sequence of what took place yesterday at Hansard. And the truth is that the member from Southeast St. Andrew, prior to the minister standing up and answering, I asked him 3 times, would he withdraw or postpone? That was an option that was open to him, and he chose not to exercise any of those options. The minister stood up and he indicated he wanted the answers. He received them, and therefore that signals to anybody, whether a member of parliament here or not, and this is my final statement on the matter, that he had accepted it, and in our discussions as the House Leader and myself, we have agreed that we will have discussions on the standing order, because the standing order is silent as to the position of the minister answering. I take your point in relation to question time. I take your point in relation to the Prime Minister's question time on the second sitting of the month, and I agree that we will, in fact, hold to the standing orders. And those are my comments on the matter. I think as the leader of the opposition business, you were clear as I was, and we have decided there has to be some decision as to the way forward in answering the matters.
Madam Speaker, will you allow me?
Very briefly, because we have a lot of business to do.
You will recall that yesterday I was the one who brought up the point about Section 17.3 did not give the answerer the right to deputize or delegate that responsibility. The sequence of events, Madam Speaker, was that you made a ruling based on Section 17.3, which was an erroneous ruling. The member placed reliance on that particular ruling. And he said he disagreed, and you said that is the ruling. You gave the member permission to answer the questions. And when the member stood up, based on the fact that you as Speaker had ruled, he asked, where are the copies? And the copies were circulated. The fact is, Madam Speaker, the genesis of what happened was an erroneous ruling by placing reliance on Section 3, which did not give the minister the right to deputize or delegate the responsibilities to another minister. And that is where it started. I understand that, as you have correctly said, when you made reference to 17.9, that the member was asked whether he would want to continue the question and the answer or not, then it was already laid down the wicket, Madam Speaker. Right?
It was not laid.
He did say.
Stop you. Member, it was not laid down the wicket. The minister had not begun to answer the questions. And I am not debating the matter with you. I have agreed, as the minister, your House Leader, said, that we are going to have discussions on it. I asked the minister, you're at liberty to check Hansard. After I made the ruling, I asked the member from Southeast 3 times whether he would propose. I am not debating it. I am repeating what took place. And as the House Leader said, we are having discussions. And please understand very clearly that I heard, I think, from your mouth that there are occasions when the Speaker rules and a particular stance is taken. I have every regard for everyone and the opinions of everyone here in this Parliament. It is the highest court of the land. And there are occasions where this Speaker has good reason, sound reason, to invoke the provisions of the standing orders. I do not always do that because I do have a discretion sometimes to show leniency in certain circumstances. I'm saying to you this afternoon, I'm explaining clearly, I stand by my ruling yesterday that had the minister, when I said, go ahead, Minister Morgan, with the answer, had the member from Southeast St. Andrew said to me, and you may confer with your leader of house business, had he said to me, I will not accept them, I want them postponed, I would have had no choice. And that is the discussion I had.
Madam Speaker, we are at one in the latter part of what you said. And I did not dispute
member,
that
I really am not going to debate it with you. So please, I'm going to ask you
and
to
I
let
will
the
take
matter
my speech short, Madam Speaker, only to say that my position here, Madam Speaker,
I have heard your position.
In the latter part of it, I did not disagree with you asking the members 3 times, because I'm aware of that. And you said that, right? I'm only pointing out what led the member to agree to the question. And
I heard you clearly, and I outlined that myself this afternoon. So I've heard you several times, member. I think the point is well made, and I think your House leaders handled the matter very capably.
Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, today we will get on with the business of the House. And I want to use the opportunity to just welcome the Cuban ambassador, His Excellency Fermin Quinones Sanchez. Welcome. I join the Speaker in welcoming you here. Thank you for coming.
Statements by ministers.
Madam Speaker, we have one statement today by Minister, and it's being made by the Honourable Floyd Green, MP, Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Can distribute this. Can distribute this. Yeah. You've gotten a copy, member? Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on July 5, 2022, the story of Rolando Grant came to national attention. Rolando is a deaf child whose mother, Anna K. Williams, had difficulties obtaining his birth certificate. This, Madam Speaker, kept him out of classes for 2 years. And as he is an aspiring pilot, it was important for us to assure him that his dreams are valid and that his educational journey would continue. So, Madam Speaker, 2 weeks later, on the 21st of July, I journeyed to Victoria Canal in Linstead, St. Catherine, where along with a team from the RGD, we were able to hand over the birth certificate to Ronaldo free of cost. Madam Speaker, that is symptomatic of a much broader problem. It is estimated that about 4% of our population do not have a birth certificate. This is even more severe, Madam Speaker, when we look at our disabled population, where only 15% of those who are registered with the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities have a birth certificate. This information, Madam Speaker, was gleaned from the study done by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute titled, Who Am I? The People Them Needs. Madam Speaker, we want to fix the culture of invisibility and exclusion. We want to ensure that others like Rolando are able to establish legal identity, participate in our formal economy, and receive government services. Unfortunately, members, there is a link between the lack of identity vulnerability, and poverty. This cycle of poverty has to be broken, Madam Speaker. The lack of resources that results in persons not being able to access government services causes them to become more disadvantaged and must be met with solutions. That is why, Madam Speaker, I'm proud to be a part of an administration that works alongside Jamaicans to empower families, to build their resilience, and to lift them out of poverty. And this begins, Madam Speaker, with first ensuring that they have a document that provides a foundation for their identity. So I'm pleased to announce, Madam Speaker, that on Friday, September 9th, Prime Minister Andrew Holness launched Operation Birthright, a comprehensive approach to finding persons without birth certificates who are unable to afford one and provide one for them. This program, Operation Birthright, will provide birth certificates free of cost for undocumented Jamaicans who earn less than $37,000 monthly. We have set out on a mission to reach at least 11,000 undocumented Jamaicans island-wide. This, Madam Speaker, is an extension of our 60th year of independence celebration, where we're ensuring that all Jamaicans are accounted for and can truly say that they belong to this piece of the rock. Madam Speaker, it is yet another delivery on commitments that we made earlier this year in my sectorial presentation. So, Madam Speaker, let me take some time just to share a little bit about the eligibility and application process. Persons can access and download the application form for the program from www.nidsfacts.com and submit the completed form to any RGD office island-wide for processing. The forms will have to be accompanied by a recommendation, which is on the form, and I will tell you the class of people that can recommend people for the program. The RGD will also be printed and distributing forms at their various branch offices, so people can walk into the Registrar General's department and ask them for an Operation Birthright form. In fact, yesterday, Madam Speaker, we distributed nomination forms to members of Parliament who are present, and our MPs can use that form to nominate persons who are in need of birth certificate and who fit the criteria. And the criteria is simple: having been born in Jamaica, being aged 1 year and above, having a monthly income of $37,000 or below, not currently receiving or having received similar assistance under any similar program, and being recommended by any person listed in the authorized official list. MPs are part of that authorized official list. But, Madam Speaker, to ensure the wide reach of this program, we have had put together a comprehensive list of authorized officials. And that includes the head of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, any senior official in the Ministry of Local Government certifying an individual as registered poor, MP, a Justice of the Peace, a public officer, SEG and above, a medical practitioner, a minister of religion, a police officer in the gazetted ranks, a parish councillor, dental surgeon, principal, bank manager, official representative of the Salvation Army, official representative of the Missionary of the Poor, the CEO coordinator of a registered civil society organization, and the head of the PATH program in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. So you see, what we've done, Madam Speaker, is to ensure that we can try to reach the most needy and vulnerable in our society. And of course, we will not stop there, because we're going to be taking a very deliberate approach to work with the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities to identify persons within that community who are without a birth certificate. Members, we will also be embarking on community interventions, and I take the opportunity to say to members, you can identify to us communities that you think we need to mobilize our mobile RGD services and come into that area so that we can try to find these persons who are in need. We'll also be working, Madam Speaker, with our youth through the National Youth Parliament, and they're going to be helping us coordinate community engagements to identify these persons, and so that we really reach our goal of having that 11,000 persons reach under Operation Birthright. Madam Speaker, this project is part of our National Identification Systems project. We have earmarked $350,000 United States dollars to fund Operation Birthright. And the reality, Madam Speaker, is that we're not just giving citizens a chance to identify themselves, but we're opening the doors of endless opportunities for them to become the best versions of themselves. Because, Madam Speaker, a birth certificate is not just a piece of paper. It is the start of a journey that really allows persons to access education and economic empowerment. So let me close, Madam Speaker, by thanking the members of the National Identification System project team, the Office of the Prime Minister, and the team at the Registrar's General Department. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me thank the Minister for the statement that he has made, and to say that on this side, we welcome Operation Birthright. Any move to ensure that individuals who are vulnerable and individuals who are in need of a birth certificate, that the process is easier and that they have greater access, is one that is welcome. We do know, and many of us in here, certainly as members of Parliament, would know the number of individuals registering for school who do not have a birth certificate and who would have come to us for assistance. We know how many of them for other activities would have come to us for a letter to identify them. So this is indeed something that is important. It's about identity, it's about access to programs and to services. It is also in a country with the kind of colonial past that we have had. It is about the right of individuals to claim their identity. It is about a people with a history of not being sure who they are and not being proud of who they are, having a piece of document that assists in making that better. As I said at another location, I want to make sure that it is not simply for those who can't afford it, but for whom it's a very simple process of just applying. Because those who really have great challenges are those whose birth were never registered, or who are not sure of where they were born, when they were born, and all of that. And I certainly, from personal experience, I have known many individuals who fall in that category. Many members who would have wanted certainly to apply for the social pension, for example, have had difficulty because of that. I know that there now is an accommodation for that, but certainly this would be extremely helpful for those that are doing that. I am pleased that it is not just online in terms of access, because sometimes we forget that not everyone has the same level of access to going online. So that's one. I commend the focus of individuals with disabilities, and I want to make sure that it is individuals with disabilities, but that it is also individuals who are vulnerable. I know that you have asked us to make recommendations in terms of communities, and that is good. But I want to know that the government has a system, because they have the data that we don't have, to identify where those pockets would be, so that the mobile unit would be able to go there. What we do or what we recommend is an extra, because the truth is you also do not want this program to be politicized. Yes, it is a program that should be open to all Jamaicans. And I'm also hoping that the public education program goes beyond a statement in Parliament, and that we also take it on the road so that individuals, whether they are youngsters or more mature, are aware of this opportunity. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you Thank you, Member. And I'm very happy, as I expressed to you recently, that the opposition supports the program and is on board. So, yes, we will be taking a multifaceted approach. So, the public education campaign will go on the road and will utilize different forms of media to ensure that we get the information out there. I want to say that I do take our role in this process very seriously. I'll tell you why. You know, oftentimes, remember, a lot of the persons who are without birth certificates, unfortunately, are not registered on any of our databases. Right? So it will take a hands-on approach. And that's why, one, we've incorporated the members of parliament, but additionally, to ensure that it's not just seen in political eyes, that we have a wide array, including a public officer, including a justice of the peace, for people to make recommendations. Because so many people, you know, when I sat with the team and they said dentists, and, you know, he said dentist, and I said, yes, so many people come across people who are in need of a birth certificate, and they share it with them. And already since we've announced the program, I've had people from all walks of life reaching out to me to say they know this individual, they came across them at work, they came across them in their community, at church, so we've really opened it widely. Clearly, we are definitely trying to reach the difficult cases. So I know on the forms we have put the information that members of parliament can share, and clearly on the actual forms that we circulate, there's information. You share as much as you have. So, you know, we've put TRN, some people may not be in that position. You have some people who did have a birth certificate, but, for example, the birth certificate got lost in a fire, but they're not in the position to afford to renew it, right? Some of those people, I was making the point, Member Phillips, that there are some people, for example, who did have a birth certificate, and again, as we've seen, they got lost in a fire, but they just can't afford to get it back, right? And again, they come to us. So some of them have some of the information, like TRN, right, because they've been through the process already. No, but if you do not have, not a challenge, right? So we are going to go for the difficult case. There are some people who have almost nothing, only hearsay. The RGD has a process to take those applications, and they send out verifiers in the field to verify the information. Sometimes people can say, boy, they heard that they were born, and check the records of the hospital, the birthing centers, the homes, right? So some of them will be more challenging, but we're really trying to get to those people. So I think I would have covered all the areas that you would have mentioned. Thank you, Member.
Madam Speaker, just a quick question. First of all, of course, the program is to be commended and fully supported on all sides. Question I'd like to ask you, institutionally, are there any other institution other than the OPM that would be involved in a government institution? For example, is there a role for the SDC? I was looking among the list. I didn't see the Social Development Commission, which is a body that I have worked with in the past on this, in trying to address the same issue. So I know they have the experience, they have information, and I think it would be good if they were made a part of this, and the resources, significant resources as it is, that they should be empowered to play a role in this as well.
Thank you, Member, and I take the recommendation. It's something we can look at. I know that there are agencies that already have programs that try to do things of this nature. So JISTV, in their interactions, especially with our ZOSO communities, have recognized that they have to place some focus on birth certificates. This is a more comprehensive approach, but we will look to see if we can incorporate the SDC. But just remember, we have put a sort of broad catch-all for public officers. So once you're SEG 1 and above, you can recommend somebody for the program. And clearly we've used the recommendations so that, you know, we're getting the most vulnerable. This is really, remember, if you do not now have a birth certificate, and it's probably important to make this point, you can apply to the RGD. There is a process to get the birth certificate. Well, that process comes with a fee. This program is really for those who cannot afford to access that process. Thank you.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: Ministry Paper number 76 of 2022, an annual report of the Office of the Utilities Regulation for the year 2021-2022. Auditor General's Department Appropriation Accounts for Head 2854 Court Management Services 2014-2015, Head 28,029 for Supreme Court Recurrent 2018-2019, and Head 7,000 Office of the Children's Advocate for the year 2018-2019.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally. Minister Terrelong.
Madam Speaker, with your leave, my lady, might I speak from a seat other than my ordinary seat in this House? Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Resolution of the Honourable House of Representatives in support of Cuba. Whereas this Honourable House has on several occasions approved a motion in support of Cuba's resolution submitted in the United Nations General Assembly entitled Necessity of Ending the Economic, Commercial and Financial Embargo imposed by the United States of America against Cuba. And whereas the 60-year-old policy of economic blockade remains in place, despite the fact that 184 member states of the United Nations, including Jamaica, representing the vast majority of the international community, voted last year in favour of the resolution. And whereas there are no formal and normal banking relations between Cuba and the United States, with implications for relations with the international banking system, and whereas the restrictions on Cuba's international financial transactions, including those with multilateral organizations for cooperation with the island, has intensified with the implementation of the blockade policy, and whereas the re-establishment of diplomatic relations in 2015, tourism from the United States of America to Cuba effectively remains illegal, with limited flights to only the capital city, Havana, and hotels remain off-limit under U.S. restrictions on patronizing companies linked to Cuba's military or security services. And whereas the U.S. government tightened the blockade against Cuba with amendments to the Cuban Assets Control Regulations to impose increased restrictions on travel, the processing of remittances, and hotel accommodation properties in 2019 and 2020. And whereas Cuba remains on the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism, which has grave implications on how third states engage with Cuba on development aid, trade, international cooperation, and transnational organized crime and technical assistance. And whereas it is welcomed that the U.S. government has announced plans to remove the limit on family remittances, to authorize remittances to non-family members sent to Cuba, to increase flights to Havana and extend flights to other cities, to allow American groups to visit on educational trips, and to relaunch the Cuban Family Reunification Parole Program. And whereas the limited ease of restrictions does not change the existing blockade, which, in its essence and its aim, constitutes an act of unilateral aggression and represents a transgression of the right to peace, development, security of a sovereign state, as well as a permanent threat to the stability of a member state of the United Nations. And whereas the blockade represents a violation of international law and is contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter and to the norms governing international trade and freedom of navigation. And whereas international humanitarian law prohibits any embargo on raw materials for food and medicine, even in times of war, and Cuba continues to be unable to trade even food and medicine with subsidiaries of U.S. companies in third-party countries. And whereas the United States of America has broadened the restricted list of Cuban entities and sub-entities that are the object of additional tax sanctions due to blockade regulations, and whereas the continuation of the blockade during the pandemic has worsened the impact of the embargo, in particular with the efforts to procure vaccines and material for producing its own vaccines, which are the best way to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the economic, commercial, and financial blockade constitutes the principal objection and obstacle for the development of the Cuban economy and hinders the implementation of the country's national plan for economic and social development, as well as the Agenda 2030 and its sustainable development goals. And whereas Jamaica's national interests are concerned with the impact of the continuation of the blockade and the extraterritorial application of U.S. laws regulating transactions between Jamaica and Cuba directly and indirectly. And whereas governments committed to the norms of the multilateral trading system, to the freedom of trade and navigation, to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, to international law and the rejection of extraterritorial application of a national law, voted again on Wednesday, the 23rd of June 2021, in favour of the resolution at the United Nations General Assembly. Be it resolved that this Honourable House express itself on the morality, legality and desirability of this decades-old blockade against Cuba, calls for renewed dialogue between the United States of America and the Cuban government, and for the lifting of this U.S. embargo against Cuba. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing order to enable me to take this motion.
Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
A bill shortly entitled the Leprosy Repeal Act 2022, read the first time. And a bill shortly entitled the Irrigation, Validation and Indemnity Act 2022, read the first time.
Madam Speaker, under public business, today we will take the Cuban Embargo Resolution 2022, and this will be taken by the Honorable Landa Terrelong, MP and Minister of State in the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. And then we will go immediately to the State of Constituency debate, where Mr. Robert Montague, MP for St. Mary Western, will speak, and also Mr. Robert Miller, MP for St. Catherine Southeastern, will also make his presentation. Madam Speaker, I think we have 4 speakers on either side of the House, and I know they will bear in mind that we have to move quickly into the State of Constituency debate. All right, thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier. Madam Speaker, I would also welcome everyone. I also wish to welcome everyone who has joined us for today's sitting of the House, those who are with us in the galleries, and those who are watching online. Madam Speaker, I do see the Cuban ambassador who is here today, His Excellency Fermin Quiñones Sanchez, along with his deputy in the House, Madam Speaker, and I wish to welcome them as well.
Minister, before the House, before we proceed, you did ask for this suspension of standing orders to allow you to take the motion, notice of which you gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister, you may now.
If it so pleases you, my lady. My lady, some 70 years ago, there was a policy enacted against the government and, in effect, the people of Cuba, which we all come to know as the trade embargo imposed against Cuba. My lady, if one were to summarize what was the intended effect of the said embargo, one could perhaps easily say that it was to topple a regime that had different principles in terms of capitalism and government structure, etc., or otherwise, if not to topple, to force such a regime to accept the principles of other regimes within the particular region. Madam Speaker, we can all agree that notwithstanding the presence of this embargo some 7 decades later, that it has failed the very purpose for which it was imposed. Madam Speaker, not only has it failed the very purpose for which it has been imposed, but the contrary in terms of the suffering of the people of Cuba has been the sole achievement of this embargo. Cuba remains a friend to Jamaica. Cuba has been there for us more recently during the time of COVID pandemic. Cuba has not only been a friend to Jamaica, but Cuba has been a friend to the world. Again, in times of outbreaks, whether it is outbreaks in Asia, in Africa, etc., Cuban doctors can be found in all corners of the world, giving the very best of themselves, the very best of their service, the very best of that tradition of Cuba, which says we believe in one humanity, and as one humanity, we must be there for our brothers and sisters. My lady, more than 97% of world governments support the ending of the blockade against Cuba, simply because in 2022, it would be folly of anyone to hold an accurate view or a correct view that Cuba somehow sponsors state terrorism. My lady, 97% of the governments of the world support the ending of the embargo against Cuba, simply because Cuba has proven time and time again that it is a friend of the world, and that notwithstanding that their views on governance might differ, that they still have a right to their autonomy, to their freedom, etc. My lady, in Jamaica, not only has Cuba been our friend in the medical field, but also in terms of the educational field. Cuba has partnered with Jamaica to build several schools. Some of them bear the names of great Latin American heroes. My lady, they continue to send teachers in our classrooms. Having recognized that we live within the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, where more than 530 of our inhabitants speak Spanish, Cuba has been there to help to empower the minds of our young kings and queens here in Jamaica by teaching the benefit of a foreign language. My lady, having regard to the poor state of the economy in Cuba, I visited Cuba some time ago, and my lady, whilst the people there I met and interacted with were happy with what they had, my lady, they wanted more. My lady, they wanted to be able to go to the supermarkets and buy whatever it is they wanted. They wanted to be able to go into their own hospitals and have whatever it is they needed for their own care and to improve or increase their livelihood. My lady, our friends in Cuba deserve all the rights that we here in the rest of the world, and certainly as one of their closest neighbors in Jamaica have. It is for this reason that we, the people of Jamaica, the government of Jamaica, maintains that this unlawful blockade should come to an end. And my lady, if I were permitted to speak in a language other than English in these Houses of Parliament, I would say to Ambassador Sanchez y toda la gente de Cuba que siempre Jamaica está aquí con todos ustedes. Nosotros damos cuenta en la realidad que la Puebla, que toda la gente en Cuba merecen los mismos derechos humanos como nosotros, y que el bloqueo es ilegal y también es un afronto a los derechos humanos, y siempre para nosotros, ustedes son amigos, todos nosotros son hermanos y hermanas, es un Caribe, es una humanidad, y estamos aquí para ayudarlos para siempre. Gracias. Thank you so much, my lady.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I too would like to join in welcoming Ambassador Sanchez and his deputy. Not many people would believe me when I say today is the first time I'm actually meeting Ambassador, who has been here for a little while. And we really hope that your stay in Jamaica will be as if you were at home, because Jamaica is indeed your home. Madam Speaker, let me thank the member for his consistency, and today I sense even greater stridency in the words that we are that we are debating today, because it does reflect a comprehensive view of the situation as it affects Cuba. And there's not much we can add, if any, to the language and, more importantly, to the prayer. So this year I won't be as verbose and elaborate as I am accustomed, and I speak in all of these debates, every single one. When it started, when we were on that side, and it shows consistency, because on this side, the spirit and indeed the word is the same, that it is full time for this blockade to end. Time has really come long ago, but now there's even a greater sense of urgency. Madam Speaker, the member has enumerated a number of things, very positive things about the Cuban government and the Cuban people. I'm not going to embellish it too much, but of course to recognize that amidst this tremendous hardship of the blockade, the Cuban people still survive, and they survive well in their health care, in their education, which we need to emulate, and in so many other aspects of their daily lives. And we really have to pay tribute to such a people, that they, despite these years of hardship, have been able to withstand them. And, Madam Speaker, not many people believe me enough. As I have said before, I had a face-to-face meeting once with Fidel. And you are permitted to say Fidel. Well, we would even say Comrade Fidel on this side. It came out of the formal session of Petrocaribe in 2005, where he participated fulsomely in the debate and supported the provisions of Petrocaribe, which really did not have immediate direct benefit for Cuba in terms of the oil trade, but certainly for Jamaica we benefited, and he was strongly in support of that. But what really caused me to have this even higher regard was on my accompanying him on his departure from Jamaica in 2005, and he inquired of where I represent in the Parliament, and I mentioned Kingston East and Port Royal, and he said to me, "Wasn't that where Michael was?" And I said, "See." With my limited Spanish. I say, "See, Fidel." And he immediately changed his expression, and we were able to delve in a fulsome conversation, at the end of which he invited me to visit Cuba. And I did visit, and we had a meeting that lasted over 4 hours. Himself on one side of the table, and myself and my team on the other side. Nobody believes that, but it's the truth. It is the truth. And during that discussion, I was amazed, because here was this leader who must be preoccupied with the blockade, must be concerned about all the issues that he was facing, but was able, with his pen or pencil, could have been pencil, and paper, was able to show me what they were doing in terms of energy conservation, and could itemize for me the amount of watts that they were able to save for each additional initiative in relation to energy conservation. And I was absolutely amazed that the leader could tell you precisely how they were able to organize energy conservation and the amount of savings, and how they have been able to survive these times. I said to him, "Pardon me, but where do you find time to do this, to get into such minutiae. And he said to me, you know, when you are in the hills and you're fighting with limited resources, you have to count every single bullet and conserve. And that's how we were able to win the war and to succeed to this point. And I thought that was a tremendous statement, especially as it relates to energy conservation. In the discussion, I showed off that we were doing things in Jamaica and that we were establishing a wind farm. And I mentioned about Wigton, and he was immediately interested in that because Cuba at that time had not yet embarked on wind technology. And in the course of things, within 2 weeks of my return, he sent a team to visit Wigton. I was very impressed. And in a short while, believe it or not, Madam Speaker, whilst we were boasting of a wind farm of 30-odd megawatts, it's now expanded to 60, Cuba, in short order, was able to quadruple what we had at Wigton, having learned from us. And in no time, Cuba was able to outperform us in this area of renewable energy. And, Madam Speaker, there is an issue that saddens me because during those same discussions, he made a tremendous offer to Jamaica, which was accepted. It was in relation to, first of all, East Kingston, to show how by using energy-saving bulbs, we could conserve. And we were able to do that as a pilot in East Kingston, and thank God that did not receive any negative comments at all. And it was applauded in going into the major project, which was to receive over 6 million bulbs, which to this day has proven to be the single largest energy demand project ever undertaken in Jamaica, and for which the data show that we were able to conserve tremendously whilst those bulbs have been installed. I want to pay tribute to the generosity of the Cuban people, of the Cuban government. It is unimaginable what they have done in their state of denial, in their state of deprivation based on the blockade. And that today they still are able to extend this hand of friendship, this hand of tremendous contribution in the field of medicine. I mean, our students benefit from their education system, not only in the medical field, but a whole range of other areas. And as we, in one voice, again, call upon our friends in the United States, I have to endorse, without any change in wording, the full prayer that the member has presented today. And we hope and pray that this will be the last year. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member from St. Andrews Southwestern.
No, ma'am. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am once again standing to give my full support to the resolution that is in front of us. I also would like to add my own words of welcome to Ambassador Fermin Quinones Sanchez, who is here with us, and those who have joined for the occasion. 60 years ago, Madam Speaker, there was an executive order for a blockade against Cuba, which has resulted, as others have said, in chronic shortages, deteriorating conditions, and in fact has made COVID-19 much harder than it needed to have been, including preventing Cuba from being able to produce its own vaccines as it would have wanted because of the restrictions of the blockade. In fact, I was reading a news item not so long ago that actually indicated that according to declassified documents, the U.S. had taken a decision to use sanctions as part of its toolkit to overthrow Castro. Quite frankly, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the Western Hemisphere back in April 1960, I think it was Lester Mallory at the time, indicated that every possible means should be undertaken to promptly weaken the economic life of Cuba, to bring about, as he said, hunger, desperation, and overthrow the government of Cuba. As we have seen 60 years later, this has not been a reality, and therefore one would have thought that it would be recognized that it is time to end the blockade. Notwithstanding the 184 countries who voted last year in favor of the resolution, we are still here. As I've said, there's absolutely no doubt that the blockade hampers access to inputs, medical technologies, medical equipment, and items for basic everyday needs. I remember one year just looking at how many pencils they were prevented from putting in the hands of Cuban children, millions, because of the blockade. Year after year, the majority of states, as I've said, have recognized that this is a collective punishment which is incompatible, as Alfred Desayas says, with present-day human rights. The Cuban government and the Cuban people have done exceptionally well. In fact, if resilience was a people, it would be Cuba, just based on what they have done. So I join my voice to those calling for the end of this long-standing, inhumane blockade against the people of Cuba. The resolution asks us to express ourselves on the morality, legality, and desirability of this blockade. I stand to say it is immoral, it is illegal, totally undesirable, and deleterious in terms of its effect on the people of Cuba. I want to also ask, as I end, Madam Speaker, that the Jamaican government places unequivocally on record the position of the Parliament and the people of Jamaica. Because we stand in Parliament today speaking on behalf of the people of Jamaica, but we know that the people have spoken long and loud that their voices should be counted amongst those denouncing the embargo. And we call for it, not just because Cuba is a loyal friend and a generous neighbor. We do it because we know that time comes for this injustice against the people of Cuba to end. Madam Speaker, if I'm permitted to just say a word or two, not as long as my colleague member did, in a language that is not of our own, I would like to say, es un gran placer para mí, individual, participar en este proceso, apoyando esta resolución. Cada año me pongo aquí de pie para hablar a favor de esta resolución. Ojalá que llegue el momento, el día en que no haría falta hacerlo. Thank you.
I really want to thank all the members so far. And just before you rise, Minister from St. Mary, Western, in keeping with the fact that this speaker will always try to abide by the standing orders, I welcome and thank both the minister and the speaker from St. Andrew Southwestern for their the use of another language, notwithstanding Standing Order 6, which says our debates must be in the English language. I am, however, allowing them, both the minister and other speakers, in the spirit in which their presentations were meant, although they can interpret the language. And this is notwithstanding the Standing Orders number 6, but this speaker is allowing it in the spirit in which it was mentioned, and I hope you don't object. I'm now going to call on the Minister, the Member of Parliament from St. Mary Western to make his contribution.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I will abide by Standing Order 6.
You don't have any choice.
No, I will abide by Standing Order 6, and I don't want to put my speaker in any position that she's not comfortably. So, Madam Speaker, once again, Madam Speaker, I rise to lend support to the resolution, because I represent a section of a parish which I believe is the only parish whose Chamber of Commerce has an agreement with the National Chamber of Commerce of Cuba, which is the St. Mary Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. That relationship, Madam Speaker, has resulted in hundreds of St. Mary students being allowed to study in Cuba, which is our closest neighbor. Because from my constituency on a clear day, you can actually see Santiago from both Prospect and Montreal, that Dr. Guy knows very well. Indeed, Madam Speaker, while we support the resolution and Jamaica can list out the things Cuba has done for us, take our students, train them, then send back their citizens as our doctors, nurses, teachers, professionals. The question I would like to ask, what has Jamaica done for Cuba? And I think, using a phrase from my colleague, time come that Jamaica should find some avenue, something to give back to the people of Cuba. It is always good and well to talk how much you love the Cubans. It is good to talk how much they have done for us. But we need to show that the relationship goes two ways. And whether it is in agriculture, whether it is in sports, whether it is in coaching, and I would recommend that our Minister of Sport and the mover of the resolution sits in that ministry, should explore some kind of arrangement that the Cubans themselves can tell the world what Jamaica has done for Cuba. Apart from hosting Jose Marti in the long old days, and apart from the President of the Senate having the only photograph of Jose Marti and voluntarily taking it to Cuba and handing it to the people of Cuba as a gift, we need as a nation, Madam Speaker, to examine the relationship and let it not be a one-way relationship. We support the resolution and we wish the people well. Ambassador, welcome.
From St. Mary's Southeastern.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise also to support the resolution where Cuba is submitted to the United Nations General Assembly entitled The Necessity of Ending the Economic, Commercial and Financial Embargo imposed by the United States of America on Cuba. Madam Speaker, it is remarkable that a country after 60 years of embargo has been resilient. The ingenuity of the people is evident. The perseverance of the people is evident. And the creativity of the people of Cuba is here for all to see. Nothing broke that indomitable spirit. Nothing. But, Madam Speaker, what concerns me even more is that 184 countries, member states of the United Nations, including Jamaica, representing the vast majority of the international community, voted in favor of this resolution because it shows how unjust this resolution is. And even with the establishment of diplomatic relations in 2015, tourism from Cuba, from USA to Cuba, effectively remains illegal. So, while, Madam Speaker, we welcome these gestures from the United States, it is not enough. It is time that the embargo ends against Cuba. It's a travesty, Madam Speaker, and that travesty needs to be corrected. Imagine a country that has undergone so much trauma because of the embargo, but yet still, the country could have developed 3 different vaccines in the pandemic. The Abdala vaccine, the Sobrano 2, and the Plus. In the pandemic, without much resources, shows the strength of this particular country. But not only that, they have an infant mortality of less than 5 per 1,000. Less than 5 per 1,000. And 99% of Cubans sees a doctor once per year. 99%. This shows the strength of this country we call our neighbor Cuba. Madam Speaker, my St. Mary colleague from Western St. Mary spoke, and I agree, because we have something that we can say we can give to Cuba. We have our own tourism product that we have perfected over the years. We have our sporting stalwarts, our sporting greats, who have represented Jamaica on the international stage, which shows that we have something here that we can always share with the people of Cuba. And I agree with him that Cuba has given us so much. They've given us doctors, nurses. Cubans have fought on the international scene against the apartheid system in South Africa, and with a number of African countries to liberate themselves. But yet still, Cuba is not given its pride of place in this world. And I believe that the time has come, Madam Speaker, that this must end. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to first recognize Ambassador Fermin Quinones Sanchez and his deputy, and to welcome those who have joined us in the gallery. Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased and proud today to listen to the discussions on both sides of this aisle. And when I look back at how we started this debate, it wasn't always like this. It was not always as it is. Because I remember that when we started it, we were on this side of the House. We were in opposition. And when I moved the resolution, it was not supported. But through the wisdom of the then majority, the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, his blessed memory, we negotiated and came to an understanding and made some adjustments to the resolution, which allowed the passage of the resolution at that time. But since then, Madam Speaker, much has happened. Much has happened. And I can say how pleased I am to see that our foreign policy on Cuba is one of the foreign policies on which both sides have now come to agreement, solid agreement, that we now have what I consider a common policy on Cuba. With respect to the blockade, there is no disagreement, no room for disagreement on this issue. It is simply an anachronism, a relic of a Cold War era. It makes no sense other than it continues to be, as it has long been, that Cuba is no longer a foreign policy matter for the United States. It has become a domestic political issue. And I say that, Madam Speaker, because I had the opportunity some years ago to speaking to a former Secretary of State of the United States about this matter, because she was asking me, why is it that Jamaica was not more strident against Cuba and its human rights position? And my simple answer to her was, Madam Secretary, you and I cannot discuss Cuba because for us, Cuba is a foreign policy, is a neighbor, a friend, and it's a foreign policy matter. For you, it's a domestic political issue, and I'm not allowed to discuss domestic political issue with you. She smiled, acknowledged what I was saying, but persisted in her question. Madam Speaker, the truth is that the only reason, I'm strongly of the view, that the only reason we continue to discuss this matter of blockade against Cuba is because of the US's domestic political constituencies. Cuba for the United States is not a foreign policy matter. It's a domestic political issue. It determines who becomes the President of the United States in a very direct way. And if Florida votes a certain kind of way, then it has implication for either of the major political parties. But Madam Speaker, I really want to just say something about the issue, the point raised by the member from St. Mary Western. And it's the question he posed about what have we done for Cuba and what should we do for Cuba. I accept, Madam Speaker, that we need to consider having more programs on a bilateral basis. I accept that. However, Madam Speaker, when it occurred to me that I should introduce this resolution to this Parliament, it was because I understood that Cuba, one of the ways in which we can help Cuba, our friend and neighbor, was to do exactly what we're doing here today, which is introducing in this House of Parliament, a resolution which represents not only a foreign policy statement about Cuba, but it represents the wishes of the people of Jamaica, because in truth and in fact, when we pass this resolution here today, we would have been one of the few parliaments, if any, in the world that is debating this resolution on Cuba, passing a resolution and instructing our foreign ministry to vote in a particular way. And that's different from the foreign ministry deciding on its own that it is simply carrying out a foreign policy objective. It matters to the people of Cuba that we're doing what we're doing here today. And I don't think that is fully appreciated by our members here. And so that when we moved it on that the first occasion, I remember a member that was then on the other side, saying, why are we moving this baseless resolution? What difference is going to make? And we're wasting our time. And I said, no, we're not. The Cuban people, in their hour of need to see the Jamaican Parliament and the parliamentarians standing up, shoulder to shoulder, and to speak in the way that we are now speaking, that the time has come for the blockade to be removed. They need it, and it's not by accident that the ambassador is here and that the delegation is here. It's not by accident. It matters to them that we are sending this very powerful signal to the world and to our friend, the United States. Madam Speaker, my colleague, the opposition spokesman and leader of opposition business, in closing his comments, wish that this be the last such. And so did my colleague from Southwest St. Andrew, but in another language. And so I wish that were the case, Madam Speaker. And I had reason to be hopeful when former President Obama visited the United States and begun the process of normalization of relations with Cuba. I was very hopeful that we were on a path to doing away with this blockade and normalizing the relations with Cuba. But alas, Madam Speaker, we're here today, and I must say that in a very real way, we are nowhere closer today to the blockade being lifted than we were 60 years ago. In fact, if you look at what has been happening recently, you would conclude that we are moving in the opposite direction. Because just recently, Madam Speaker, the current president has extended the Trading with the Enemies Act, which is at the cornerstone of the blockade, of the apparatus, the entire apparatus that enforces the blockade. Because on this legislation rests all the regulations around Treasury and around a number of other regulations that really are the effective tools of implementing the blockade against Cuba. And by extending the Trading with the Enemies Act, the President has given life and consent to the continuing blockade of Cuba and the tightening of regulation. On this piece and this legislation rests the terrorism, the regulation that labels and continues to label Cuba as a terrorist state. Madam Speaker, I suggest that even as we debate this resolution, and even as we speak in terms as we have, that we recognize that the U.S. administration is doubling down on a wrong policy, continuing to abuse the people of Cuba, and we need to continue to raise our voice and to be very strident about the fact that we have long passed the time. Long past the time. If the United States can normalize relations with Vietnam, can normalize with which it had a war, a fighting war for over 20-odd years, with China, with Russia, then what differences can it have with Cuba such that it cannot normalize its relations? What differences? Madam Speaker, I suggest that is really about might being right. It's really about might being right. And one of the gifts we can give to continue to give to Cuba is to continue and signal our commitment to raising our voices, not just here, but outside of this Parliament, and to continue every year and to pledge that we will continue every year with this resolution, regardless of who is on either side in this House, because it is right, and we need to send a powerful message to the world that we stand with Cuba. Cuba is not only a neighbor, but is a friend. And I say to you, in this resolution, I'm very pleased to see that we recognize that in taking a stance on this resolution, it's not just a stance for Cuba, it's a stance for us, because I suggest that the blockade has interrupted our normal relations between countries, between Jamaica and Cuba, and it has cost Jamaica as well. It's not just the Cuban people, but the Jamaican people have borne a significant burden because of this blockade, and it's time we get rid of it. The time has come. Madam Speaker, it pleases you. Thank you.
The member from St. Catherine, Northeastern.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the resolution. And interestingly, Member Hilton, I'm going to go directly to a quote by you when you were opposition spokesperson on foreign affairs and foreign trade. And I quote, "The assumption that the blockade against Cuba only affects Cuba," I see you're remembering, Member Hilton, "only affects Cuba is quite wrong. We in Jamaica and throughout the region and wider international community continue to pay a price." And so, Madam Speaker, I have interest in the following aspect of the resolution. And whereas the economic, commercial, and financial blockade constitutes the principal obstacle for the development of the Cuban economy and hinders the implementation of the country's national plan for economic and social development, as well as the Agenda 2030 and its sustainable development goals, and whereas Jamaica's national interests are concerned with the impact of the continuation of the blockade and the extraterritorial application of U.S. laws regulating transactions between Jamaica and Cuba directly and indirectly. Madam Speaker, I am therefore weighing in on the desirability of removing the decade-old blockade against Cuba as I consider how this will be beneficial to Jamaica. It has 1, great implications for trade and export, 2, open markets for established Jamaican companies, 3, among others, Jamaica will benefit from its strategic proximity. This view is girded by the strong support given by this side to the lifting of the U.S. embargo against Cuba, a view offered by the late Dr. Ken Baugh, who was the then Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And let's turn the light bulb on what Dr. Baugh said. Light bulb on what Dr. Baugh said. The government has not promulgated any law or any measure that would obstruct the freedom of commercial activity, trade, and economic cooperation, or which we would be in violation of the sovereignty and the rights of the Cuban people. Dr. Baugh reiterated that the administration continued to escalate the trading and cooperation between Cuba and Jamaica and maintained that constructive conversations remain the most acceptable means for advancing peace and stability of the region as in any part of the world. And so, Madam Speaker, in very clear English, I will say to the Cuban ambassador, we look forward to the prosperity of Cuba, our friend and our neighbor. We look forward to your full liberation to be able to work, trade, and to do business. I support the resolution.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I too would like to join you and the Parliament in welcoming Ambassador Firmin to our House here. Madam Speaker, 60 years of repression is enough. 60 years of refusing a people and a nation of their aspirations is enough. 60 years an attempt at isolation is enough. And every year, Madam Speaker, since this was introduced in this Parliament, we debate this motion. This is my third contribution to this motion, Madam Speaker. And every year, the United Nations debate this motion as well. And we pass resolutions every year because we feel that it is the right of the Cuban people to determine their future. And every year, Madam Speaker, it comes to naught. And people ask the question, why do we this? Are we wasting our time doing this every year? But we do this, Madam Speaker, because we hold the people of Cuba very close to our hearts. And we know that each time we do it, we chip away at something, it will eventually make it weaker. We hope that each year, by doing this, we will enlighten others of the futility of this embargo. And we hope that each year, by doing this, we'll help to keep alive the hopes and aspirations of the people of Cuba. But despite that attempt, Madam Speaker, Cuba has over the years been an example of what true South-South relations have been and ought to be. We cannot forget their assistance to Jamaica over the years. Infrastructure development, as was spoken to earlier. We cannot forget our schools that were gifted to us. Osemati, Gave Maceo, G.C. Foster. Their contribution to our health, Madam Speaker, our doctors and nurses over the years, from the 70s to even in the COVID pandemic, nurses to help in the hospitals when we had our nursing shortage. The provision of some of the finest affordable specialist care exists in Cuba, in the health facilities. And many Jamaicans have gone to Cuba to benefit from those facilities, Madam Speaker. The Cuban Eye Care Program is another example where many Jamaicans were able to see as a consequence of the contribution of the government of Cuba. The leader of opposition business mentioned the training of our doctors and other personnel in Cuba. And we as a country are very appreciative of this. But Madam Speaker, it's not only to Jamaica that Cuba has contributed. Cuba has health missions in many African countries, as was said by the mover of the motion. In fact, their medical internationalism is the best in the world. In 2020, Madam Speaker, Cuban doctors and health personnel were active in over 60 countries of the world. In 2014, the Cuban government sent doctors and nurses to West Africa to help fight the Ebola outbreak there. Ebola, which is not endemic to this side of the world, Madam Speaker, but Cuba found the heart to send people to help the brothers and sisters in West Africa. In the heights of the COVID pandemic, Madam Speaker, little Cuba, starved of resources, sent humanitarian missions to Italy to help in the Lombardy region when international help was sought for COVID. Madam Speaker, in the development of COVID vaccines, Cuba was at the forefront. Their own biotechnology sector went to work and 4 vaccines were developed: Abdala, Soberana 1 and 2, and Mambisa. And they even offered to other countries. In fact, Mexico started using it, even though it has not been given WHO approval. But Cuba was out there at the forefront, providing vaccines for its people as well as for their friends. Cuba is a Caribbean neighbor. It is our nearest neighbor. Madam Speaker, Cuba has been a friend of many in our Caribbean and Latin American countries. We feel that as a region comprising countries which respect sovereignty and prevents barriers to others is the right way to do things. Just like what COVID has taught us, unless we are all protected, none is protected. Unless we are all respected, none is respected. Let us, Madam Speaker, as a region and as a world, respect our brothers and sisters in Cuba. Madam Speaker, we call for an end to this embargo on the people of Cuba and this isolationist stand. Cuba is a friend of the world, and I support the resolution, Madam Speaker, and saying that we call for a lifting of this immoral, this illegal, and this undesirable blockade. I thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The member from Westmoreland Western.
Madam Speaker, would you permit me to speak from a seat that is not my own? Madam Speaker, I join the calls here in this honorable House. Jamaica is a friend of Cuba. Cuba is a friend of Jamaica. The Jamaica-Cuban friendship is strong and resilient. Our geography dictates that we exist in harmony, peace, and respect for our mutual safety, security, and future. Madam Speaker, the embargo against Cuba is condemned by several members of the United Nations General Assembly, including Jamaica. Despite continued protests, the embargo continues to be imposed in spite of the United Nations repeated injunction, notably Resolution 56/9, which was passed in 2001. Madam Speaker, as recent as the General Assembly in June 2021, a resolution was passed and adopted which dictates the decade-long embargo, ending the decade-long embargo against Cuba, which is document A/75. Madam Speaker, some 184 delegates, that's 184 countries, call for the immediate end to the sanction, particularly amid the global efforts to fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Madam Speaker, we denounce this embargo in its strongest term, as it's a violation of the laws it represents, and it's also a total lack of legitimacy. Madam Speaker, the measures are arbitrary, constrained, and have a devastating economic and social effects, denying the people of Cuba in exercising their basic human rights, and it's unbearable for them. Madam Speaker, they directly subject the people of Cuba to suffering and infringe upon the physical and moral integrity of the whole population. Madam Speaker, in this respect, for all these reasons, I join the call to end the embargo against Cuba and its people. I thank you.
The member from St. James Central, and then the member from St. James West Central. And then I'll ask the minister to close.
Madam Speaker, thanks for granting me the desire. Madam Speaker, I too rise in support of this motion and what it hopes to achieve. Madam Speaker, whatever this embargo/blockade was implemented to achieve, Madam Speaker, it is either it has achieved, and if it has achieved, then it is just time to get rid of it. And if it has not, after 60 years, Madam Speaker, I am saying to us today, it has failed. Madam Speaker, Cuba, the nation, is a nation of integrity, a nation of knowledge, wisdom, and ingenuity. And it is high time that we accept them in the fold, Madam Speaker, rather than shut them out, because they have done themselves well. Just as COVID has taught Jamaicans to be resilient and to create things, so too the embargo/blockade have taught Cuba to be very ingenuity in whatever they are doing and to be resilient against things that have cast against them, Madam Speaker. Today, Madam Speaker, with a very loud voice, I too stand and say, let us end this blockade, this embargo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I couldn't help but think how good and blessed is the time today in the House, and the difference it makes when both sides of the aisles are united and resolute on a cause. And as I heard Member Hilton recalled the differences that exist at the start of the resolution and to see where we are, it gives me hope that on so many other things on which we may be divided and be apart, with the passage of time, we can come together in a united way, and we must continue to press on. You see, Madam Speaker, ours is a promise to stand up for justice, brotherhood, and peace. And I believe, insofar as Cuba is concerned, this is a promise that we intend to keep. And it is true, as Member Clark said, that if you have punishment in place for as long as this embargo has been in place, and it has not killed the spirit of the people, and they have risen and risen, and they have made much from little, and they have given and given, then it really should cause you to rethink. Madam Speaker, I cannot help but note that this U.S. policy of economic blockade against Cuba is as old as independent Jamaica. Just imagine that. And when I consider that there is consensus in the community of nations, international law, and a breach of international humanitarian law in particular, which prohibits embargo on raw materials for food and medicine, even in times of war. And when I consider that within the community of nations, 184 of the 193 nations last year voted in favor of the lifting of the embargo. And when I recall Haile Selassie's speech to the United Nations in 1963, and he said that the UN continues to be a forum where nations whose interests collide can present their cases to world opinion. The UN still provides an important exhaust valve without which the slow growth of pressures for a long time have resulted in catastrophic explosions. I cannot help but wonder whether the US shouldn't consider that this failed policy is not now so much about Cuba, but is now a matter of international morality. Madam Speaker, it is wrong. It is wrong, and I do agree with Member Hilton that insofar as the foreign policy realm is concerned, a persuadable argument can no longer be presented, and it is probably properly a domestic policy, and all matters of politics are domestic. But at this time, the international community is crying out for exemplary leadership, especially among those who are bigger and mightier and stronger. But we know that might is not always right. And it is a testament to the spirit of the Cuban people that in spite of the downtrodden, they continue to rise. In spite of the limitations, they continue to give. And so, Madam Speaker, I wholeheartedly support this resolution. And I believe it is indeed fitting that this House once again say that it is immoral, illegal, and highly undesirable for the blockade to continue. Long live Cuba. May it so please you.
Madam Speaker, hope springs eternal. I wish to thank my colleagues for having risen to support this motion. A motion which has been stated quite eloquently throughout these debates today simply has failed in its objectives. If the initial objective, as indicated, were to starve the people of Cuba and force them to open rebellion against the government that existed in 1962, it has failed. Milady, the continued embargo over the last 60 years has cost the Cuban government, in terms of economic prosperity and recovery, an estimated more than 100 billion United States dollars. This, my lady, is funds that could have been implemented to bolster their health care, bolster their education, bolster the creation of their digital market, and not only that, having recognized universally that Cuba is in fact a friend of humanity. Imagine how many more lives could have been saved internationally were Cuba able to have used this more than 100 billion United States dollars in their fight against Ebola in Africa, in their fight to assist persons suffering from earthquakes and cholera in Haiti, in their fight to assist persons in Pakistan, in their fight to assist, as noted, even the Italians and other Europeans in the fight against COVID-19. Imagine how much more of a big brother Cuba could have been. Imagine how many more carrots Cuba could have extended to the rest of humanity. My lady, in concluding, I want to reiterate the position of the people and government of Jamaica, that the time has come. The time has come for us to recognize the liberty and the important human rights of all Cubans, and at the political level, the right of every nation to self-governance. I thank you.
Madam Speaker, I really want to thank members. You're going to put it, yes. Yeah, put.
My lady, having concluded the debates on the matter, I wish now to ask that the motion be approved in this House.
Members, the question before you as parliamentarians is that the motion, debate of which has just completed, be approved. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. The motion has been approved.
Madam Speaker, I just wish to thank everyone who participated. It's great that there is no divide on this government's policy of having the embargo removed, that we were united in our presentations today. So, Madam Speaker, at this time, we will continue the State of the Constituency debate. And contributions today will be made by Mr. Robert Montague, MP for St. Mary Western, and Mr. Robert Miller, Member of Parliament for St. Catherine South East. Madam Speaker, I now ask that Standing Orders 32C3 be suspended to enable the members making their contributions during the debate on this motion to continue their speeches for 30 minutes, notwithstanding the time limit on speeches. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question before the House is that the Standing Order 32C3 be suspended to enable the members making their contributions this evening during this debate on the motion to continue their speeches for 30 minutes, notwithstanding the time limit on speeches in the standing orders. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. The member from St. Mary Western, the Honourable Mr. Robert Montague.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to speak in this most important debate. And I am very happy for it, Madam Speaker. It's my first time speaking in the constituency debate for all my time in the House. Firstly, Madam Speaker, let me thank my 4 councillors and my only councillor caretaker, my management team, workers, office staff, and my security detail, and all the good people of Western St. Mary who have sent me to represent them and their issues in this honourable House. This is when we get to bring the issues and solutions to the forefront. We hope for action, but it should not be hope, Madam Speaker. It should be that the budget is formulated on the issues of the people and not the priorities of the technocrats. Madam Speaker, I believe that a senior team from the Ministry of Finance should be here, because this is when the issues of the people are highlighted and which should form the basis on which the budget is crafted. I'm therefore recommending, Madam Speaker, that the leadership of the House demand that a senior team from the Ministry of Finance join us for the duration of this debate. Madam Speaker, the people of Western St. Mary are having a hard time with their banking needs, as the commercial banks have all gone cashless and are charging fees as if they are going out of style. We are of the view that the banks are putting profits over people. Madam Speaker, when I put my money in a bank, I expect it to be kept safe. I expect the bank to lend it out and give a portion of the interest that they charge the borrower to me. I am told that the banks credit your accounts at least twice per year with this interest. If this be so, Madam Speaker, it means that every account that has activity at least twice per year. If this is true, how then can an account become dormant? On what basis are they charging a dormancy fee? If there is no activity on the account, the banks need to tell us what are they doing with the interest earned from these accounts. If they lend out people's money and don't give back a portion of the interest earned, it is not only fraud, it is downright robbery.
Absolutely.
The Minister of Finance and the BOJ must investigate and find the banks, plus every dormant fee charged over the last 7 years must be returned with interest. If the banks refuse to pay back and stop the practice, then the minister must report the matter to the police. It is time the poor suffering bank customers get some redress, and that is why I am making the call to the Minister of Finance. Furthermore, when I lodge my money with the banks, there is an expectation on my part for the banks to keep my information confidential. Today in Western St. Mary, Madam Speaker, Apart from Jamaica National, operating 3 times per week, we have no commercial banks. We have to travel for miles to find an ATM. Most times, they are not working. Yet there is no operating standards. And people have to be standing in line with lots of cash. And many times, as you reach the machine, it broke down. Then when you lodge your funds, Madam Speaker, the banks now give my money to a third party to be collected, counted, and credited to my account. My information is in the hands of a BPO operator without my knowledge or consent. If this third party does not lodge my money on time, the bank then goes ahead and charges overdraft fees. Again, no liability from the bank. The BPO employee who signed no confidentiality agreement with me now has my information. If one of them takes 10 cents from my account daily, or 10 cents out of every account, you know how much that is, Madam Speaker? It is estimated that there are over 500,000 savings and current accounts that are not dormant. Madam Speaker, that's $1 million per month if 10 cents is taken 5 days per week. My information can be sold to a lot of scammers. And as you know, being from the West, that now you have scamming in Ireland, a new industry. Many people are seeing funds going missing from their accounts, credit cards running up massive balances, and all kinds of funny activities on their accounts. But the banks don't hold themselves liable. They hold the people of Western St. Mary and other rural towns liable. And if you appeal to them for redress, they tell you all 4 or 5 months before you can get any redress. The Minister of Finance and the Bank of Jamaica must act on this matter. A banking license, Madam Speaker, is a privilege. It's not a right. The issuer of that license can rein in the entity. Don't tell me that the Minister or the BOJ has no power. The government always have a big stick, and they must use it on behalf of the people of Western Sydney. If you can't use it against the banks who are licensed, how you run down a taximan who is also licensed? He has a license, and we beat up on the taximan when the service is not up to par or when he breaches. Is it only that poor people we have strength for? If you cannot touch or rein in the banks, then don't touch the taxi operator. There must be one rule, one principle for everybody, banker or taximan. Madam Speaker, I am calling on the Minister to use this moment to call in the banks. Give them 60 days to clean up their act and treat their customers better. I am appealing to the Minister to seize this moment. Seize the moment. Let me be very clear, Madam Speaker. Very clear. I am not calling for any taxes on the banks or on their profits, just better customer service.
Nothing is wrong with that.
There must be operating standards, penalties if they are breached, abolishment of fees, and they must build covers over the ATM to accommodate at least 10 customers. We live in a tropical country. The sun can be merciless at times, and the rain can fall at any time. The banks must be held to a higher standard, and they must give better service. The people of Western St. Mary are asking for a longer transition period for the banks to go cashless. We agree that going cashless is the way of the future, but the move is too sudden. Older persons are being forced to expose their account information and PIN because they cannot manage the ATM process. Not even me can do it. People are at the ATMs now, willing and waiting to assist older persons. Then them thief their money. Many older Jamaicans don't even want their children to know how much money in the bank account. Now they are being forced to hand over this information to so-called helpful strangers, and the banks who create this problem are again blameless. How can the minister sit down and allow the banks to be disrespecting ordinary Jamaicans? We have an institution that you issue a license to, and they are refusing to accept legal Jamaican tender that is issued by the Bank of Jamaica. If I go in the bank in Port Maria with a $20 or $100 bill, they refuse to accept it, and it's not a counterfeit bill. It's legal tender, and that is wrong. It is the same BOJ who issues the $100 bill that issues their license. So if they can accept the license from the BOJ, they can accept the legal tender from the BOJ. St. Mayor, people are wondering if the minister and the BOJ are protecting them or the banks. The Minister of Finance is a rural man, and I know he will protect both the banks and the customer, because there has to be balance. We cannot be unreasonable. Madam Speaker, right now, the people are suffering at the hands of these rapacious bankers. To the Minister of Finance, I say, seize the moment. This is in your hands. And his hands are capable hands. And we are depending on him to act. The Minister of Finance must also sit down with Minister Hill and Jam Pro and design a program to seek out and attract other banks to come to Jamaica. There are smaller sound banks all over the southern US, in Canada and in the UK. We can look to India or Singapore. The minister is aware, I know, that there are some of the world's best and soundest banks are in Africa. We can invite them here. Because the kind of profits our banks are making, it won't be difficult for other banks to come here to try to make some of these profits. The Minister of Finance, if he wants to cement his legacy, must act now. I say to the minister, don't let St. Mary people turn this moment into a movement. With all the time on my hands, I can tell you, I won't sit down and make the movement in St. Mary left me. I urge the minister to seize the moment. I believe, Madam Speaker, that enough has been said on the matter. Madam Speaker, the Queen of England has died, and may her soul rest in peace. The acting House leader said yesterday that we have unfinished business. Indeed we do, but we also have unfinished business ourselves. If we are to be a republic, not only must the Constitution be changed, but many other symbols, orders, and arrangements too. Holding a referendum is not the end-all nor the be-all of this process. The referendum can be the start or the end of the process. I would want it to be the end. So let us sort out everything now, so that when you hold the referendum, it's smooth sailing to a functional republic. For example, is the new Republican-type constitution draft and ready? Do we need a constitutional assembly? Madam Speaker, our seals and emblems and buttons on the police uniforms will have to be changed, as the JDF has already changed theirs. We now have an opportunity to change to a Jamaican standard, or are we going to change from Elizabeth R2 to Charles R3, and then 2 years' time we have to change again to the Jamaican thing? So just seize this moment and make one change. I am not a lawyer, I must admit, neither am I legally trained. But these are some of the questions that the people of Western St. Mary are asking. Since King Charles III is the King of Jamaica and head of state, is there a Jamaican throne separate from a Canadian or English throne? Can the King abdicate his Jamaican throne without abdicating his British throne? While we know that if Jamaica wishes to leave the monarchy, we must hold a referendum. What if the king wishes no longer to be our king or head of state? As many royals from time to time pull away from their royal duties. Can we force him to be our head of state? Is that allowed? Since he is the king of Jamaica, can we petition him? Can we ask him to give up Jamaica so we can save the expense of a referendum? What's the timetable or pathway not only to have a referendum, but to have a fully functional republic? I am no lawyer, but these are some of the questions my citizens want answered. Madam Speaker, the other matter Western St. Mary needs to be highlighted is that we need the practice of issuing checks without work to people under 60 to stop. We must give them work. The pandemic is over. The country has many little things to get done. Give them work. Clean drains, build sidewalk, train rivers, maintain bridge, weed roadside. Give the people work. Prioritize the poor and vulnerable. Those who would have gotten the checks, give them the work, because by the sweat of your brow, you must eat bread. Too much freeness is not good. I know that some universities and international institutions are pushing this cash transfer solution, but in Jamaica, we have many little things that needs to be done. Let's combine the cash and the work and get them done. Furthermore, we need a massive infrastructure program that targets community, housing schemes and farm roads, bridges, drains and river training. We need $20 billion to be allocated per year for the next 5 years. These funds must be allocated to the NWA and the municipal corporations. However, a portion of these funds must be reserved for constituencies to deal with local priorities. An equal minimum amount should be allocated per constituency and additional funds given based on parish council divisions and population size based on the voters. It is manifestly unfair for constituencies with 2 parish council divisions to get the same amount as those with 4, 5, or 6 divisions, or those with twice as many citizens. It is the people that we put at a disadvantage. Western St. Mary has 5 parish council divisions and 40,000 persons on the voters list. Yet constituencies have 2 divisions and less than 20,000 on the list get the same amount as Western St. Mary. The smaller constituencies end up getting more, and the tax-paying citizens in larger constituencies get less. The practice must stop. And if it means that we have to carry a resolution, so to do, so will it be. The source of funding for my solutions are a portion of the unused recurrent balances from the agencies, departments, and ministries. B, reduce the Ministry of Finance spending on consultants and studies for 2 years, and the BOJ profits. If in the midst of the pandemic, the BOJ could have handed over $30 billion in profit in order for us to craft a supplementary budget, can you imagine the profit now that we are recovering stronger? In addition, Madam, we are asking that the Constituency Development Fund be increased 3-fold, or to any amount that the original policy dictated. A percentage of the budget was to be placed in the fund, but due to the recession in 2009, we had to reduce it from the 40 million to 15 million. And God bless Prime Minister Holness, who took it back up to 20 million where it is now. The Minister of Finance is a man that loves to follow policy. In this case, I urge him to follow that policy. The originating policy document called for a set percentage of the budget to be spent on the concerns and issues of the people, and this was 1% after capital and debt expenditure. of the $912 billion budget, when you remove capital and debit repayments, you are left with $540 billion. 1% of that divided by 63 gives you $85 million. That is what the CDF ought to be. We are only asking for 60 now because we understand the realities that face the Ministry of Finance. Madam Speaker, there are allegations, however, that some MPs do not fully allocate all of their CDF annually, and the unspent funds have to be returned to the Ministry of Finance, thus robbing the people of a benefit. These MPs must be named. Their names must be made public. It is a travesty of justice that the little money allocated to improve the lives of the people at the community level is not being properly used. The names must be published and the funds reallocated to MPs who spend their money, like Western St. Mary. Madam Speaker, hundreds of students are in college and university today because of the CDF. Hundreds of sporting competitions all over the country are being held because of the CDF. The sick is assisted, the poor is assisted, there is help with burying the dead, small roads are repaired, housing material bought, small economic assistance given. The CDF is a good program. It is an effective program. Madam Speaker, I congratulate former Prime Minister Bruce Golding for coming up with this idea. It is a good program and we should be proud of the CDS. It is a policy success. Let us increase and improve it. Right, equally, Madam Speaker, there are many who will argue against it. Yes, oh Mr. Speaker. Yes, that is their right to argue against it. Let's respect their right to do so. Let's not bash them. But the people who we represent are demanding an increase, and we must go and abide by the original policy because that has not changed. Let's not cherry pick which policy guidelines we are to obey. The collective position of the people must be respected. It is this Parliament that passed the original policy document. Let us obey it and urge the Minister to increase the CDF. Western St. Mary is not asking the Minister of Finance to be wanton, reckless, or free-handed with the country's resources. We are just asking that the priorities be reordered within the same revenue envelope. Good ministers of finance must be tight, but not mean. And our minister is tight, sort of. We are not asking to increase taxes. We are not asking for the ministry to miss targets. We are not asking for the minister to grow the debt or slow the reduction, nor to reduce the deficit. We in Western St. Mary are asking the minister to be responsible, but reorder the priorities, do some cuts and tighten up. We have come too far to waste the gains. We have sacrificed too much to waste the gains. We are seeing the light as a country. We are turning the corner. We have traveled too far to waste the gains. Mr. Speaker, people of Western St. Mary wish to ask for an increase in the amounts allocated to run the office of a Member of Parliament, so that our constituents can be better served. My citizens know the value of a good office and are demanding, not asking for a good office. They have made it very clear that their representative must be paid properly in keeping with the office. MPs many times have to pay for medication, food, school book, deal with emergencies of the people, because sometimes by the time you finish with the procurement for CDF, sick people dead. In addition, we must be in the public sector wage reviews, ensure that members of Parliament are included in that review. Equally, Mr. Speaker, Ministers must go back to be paid $1 more than the permanent secretary. The minister's salary must be more than the PS salary. You can't be the boss, the head of the entity, and you're getting less than the managers who report to you. No Sankey, no Simpson. The arrangement is wrong. It disrupts the normal flow and order. So let me be very clear. My constituency has told me that I must not accept any token salary reduction for window dressing or PR purposes, because they depend on my salary to help buy the medication when Friday comes. So if my salary is reduced, they have a problem. Also, it is time we include our senators in the local government health scheme. As a matter of fact, we and all the government workers need a proper health insurance. This managed pool fund is not adequate, and it is too expensive for the taxpayer. It is cheaper to use the money and purchase proper health insurance. And we also need to fix the pension arrangements. MPs contribute to their pensions. We are not wholly dependent on the public purse. So let's fix the pension arrangement so retired parliamentarians can be paid their pension and be included on the health insurance. Mr. Speaker, one day, all of us in here are going to be an ex-parliamentarian. One day. So let us do it now, while we are here. We are also asking that a suitable allocation, starting with $2 billion each, be given to rural water and rural electrification, or NESAL, or any name you want to call it. Let's do that for 3 years and get pipe water and electricity into every community. Let us make $2 billion with a B. With a B like Bobby. Arbusha. Let us make 100% access to water and light a priority over the next 3 years. Let us set that goal as a country. We must give the Ministry of Energy the funds to restart the program using solar generators for houses that are just too far off the grid and too expensive to reach. Credit must be given to the former Minister of Energy, Dr. Andrew Weekly, who started that solar program. Let us big him up and press on, and also mention Philip Paulwell because of the light bulb. So let us allocate the money and let Darrell do it. Solar-powered water system must be used to get water into remote communities. Mr. Speaker, I had such one system, and on the night of the 31st of July, some little dirty criminal came and stole the panels and batteries. But thanks to the hard-working Superintendent of Police, Superintendent Bobbitt Morgan, and her team, they were able to detain one and are pursuing investigations in the matter, and we are confident that the superintendent will make an arrest of this dirty, frowsy, thieving criminal who tried to deprive the people of Montreal of their water. Unvarnished language, but the dirty thief is unvarnished too. I also need an update on the promised Masonal water system. This was promised in our manifesto from 2007. The pipes were bought for $72 million. It is time work start on the system. The people are suffering for water. The Geisel water system needs a generator as they suffer from low voltage almost every day. Mr. Speaker, is it beyond the NWC and the K factor to buy a generator for Geisel? Plus the Rio Mino line that stops at Moorlands in northeast St. Catherine, less than a mile away from the plant, must be completed so that a new source of water can get to Geisel. The new source in Seafield must be developed and added to the system. Mr. Speaker, 240 horse pumps and 4 miles of 4-inch pipes were bought with United Nations money in the early 2000s and placed at Lucky Hill in St. Mary in order to lift water to Jeffreytown and Decoy so they could be removed from the Geisel system. This worked, and the citizens were getting water until the NWC borrowed one of the pumps. Then they later borrowed the second pump and replaced them eventually with a smaller pump. We are now demanding that at least one of the 40 horsepower pump be returned to Lucky Hill so the people of Jeffreytown, Top Road and Decoy can get water. The Eden Park housing scheme that was built when another administration was in power had no water connected. The Housing Agency of Jamaica started some work 2 years ago to lay pipes and connect the water for the people. Work has stopped for over a year now, and we need this work to be completed. Mango Valley needs a new tank and a non-return valve, so all of Mango Valley and Fellowship Hall can be served. Gale needs to be connected to the labyrinth system. Gale is the capital of the wonderful constituency of Western St. Mary and is suffering. Yet some in excess of 7 million gallons of water are available in labyrinth, only 2 miles away. The Hunstone-Wellington system is in need of some valves and to be connected to the Bonnygate system. In the Tower Isle area, all the housing developments are suffering from water shortages, and we are expanding Airbnb tourism in that area. Mr. Speaker, Western St. Mary has 55% of its lands untitled. We need titles. The National Land Agency needs to declare St. Mary a project area under its systematic program without delay. This will unlock huge economic potential for the people of Western St. Mary. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you cannot find 1 mile of pothole-free road in Western St. Mary. We need a special program. But let me thank Minister Everald Warmington for his tireless efforts to help us in Western St. Mary. He needs more resources, much more resources, and he ought to be given it.
Mr. Speaker, the member's presentation is most riveting, and whilst the time allotted has passed, I now ask that the standing orders be suspended to enable the minister to continue the member to continue his speech to its conclusion, notwithstanding the time limit on speeches. It's riveting.
Acting House Leader, would you want to be more specific as to the time?
Given the riveting nature of the member's presentation, and I have noticed how the entire backbench has completely been enthralled by it, I think that sufficient time be allowed for him to complete would be best stated, Mr. Speaker.
Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Aye. Ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank you and my colleagues from both sides of the House for allowing me a little extension. Mr. Speaker, we need an update from the National Housing Trust about the Galena housing scheme that has been promised and the upgrade to the Industry Pen housing scheme. The Most Honourable Prime Minister gave a commitment to the people, met with them and heard from them himself. And he gave them a commitment that the NHT would have corrected the ills of that scheme, a scheme that Minister Samuda knows very well up in Three Hills. Apart from cleaning the sewage tank, we are seeing nothing nor hearing nothing from the NHT. But the people of Industry Pen love their Prime Minister. They believe in their Prime Minister because they know he is the prosperity giver and the builder. Yes. So we are asking the NHT to rise to the occasion and provide an update and tell us when they're going to start the Prime Minister's program. Mr. Speaker, let me also congratulate the Most Honourable Prime Minister Andrew Holness on the social housing program. Yes, sir. Prime Minister, wherever you are, thank you for conceptualizing and implementing this wonderful program. It's a game changer. Continue, Prime Minister, to hand over houses. And may I suggest to the most honorable Prime Minister that he doubles the budget for the social housing program. Yes. But Prime Minister, please understand that not everybody needs a house. Some people have the house already, but it needs some repairs. We need a housing repair program as well. Because there are houses in Western St. Mary that need 100 or so building blocks. Some cement, some ply, some zinc. And I am asking that we start a program of housing assistance where each constituency could start off with about 30 million per year for the next 3 years. This can be from the unclaimed results of the NHT or from the BOJ profits. Housing assistance, Mr. Speaker, is the biggest request in Western St. Mary, followed by farm work yard. Mr. Speaker, we need to provide additional funding to the Universal Service Fund to pay for satellite-based internet service to be able to cover the 30 to 40% of rural Jamaica that fiber will never reach, or it is too expensive to reach. Satellite-based internet is the only way that we can reach every single person and community in deep rural Jamaica. We must provide internet service to our people. Internet is now a basic right. Mr. Speaker, Western St. Mary is underserved by justices of the peace. We are finding it difficult to get JPs appointed. There seems to be some deliberate blockage. Western St. Mary is the largest constituency in St. Mary by any measure, by land, by voters, and by parish council divisions, the largest. Yet at the last swearing-in ceremony for JPs, 50 were sworn in. And I had to point out to the Minister of Justice that of the 50, 24 were from Central St. Mary, the smallest constituency in the parish. 14 to Southeast and the rest to Western St. Mary. This is manifestly unfair to the people of Western St. Mary. The minister needs to correct this. The people of Western St. Mary are being punished. And let me remind the Honourable Minister, you don't have to like the Member of Parliament for Western St. Mary. But Western St. Mary, Mr. Minister, don't sit in opposition. Western St. Mary historically sits with government. So anywhere Western St. Mary go, that's where the government goes. And the people of Western St. Mary are underserved. The only other constituency that have that record is Floyd one in St. Elizabeth. They are underserved with JPs, and it's a big issue. It might be nothing to some people, but it's a big issue. And my people, if we don't treat this matter of JPs and access to the people, I might lose as the Member of Parliament. You won't lose your seat because of what your seat is. But if I lose my seat, you will become the opposition spokesman on justice. Mr. Speaker, I know you're a man with your ears on the ground. And I know you understand that my hanging and arming speech last week and what I have just said this week and what I will say in the future, I speak to the people's interests. It also has placed me in the firing line of some powerful and influential people. These powerful people will respond one day. I know that. So, Mr. Speaker, I have already received the messages, but I must cool and behave myself. So, Mr. Speaker, listen out for a new rumor story about me. The social media worries are being pumped on. They're planning to take me on. Look out for some report or something, because they're coming after this little country guy, because he is speaking for the people. I am advising you, sir, that when the Philistines rise up against me, because I dare to say what the majority of Jamaicans want to be said, I speak for the citizens, nobody else. I do not speak for special interests, but for the people of Western St. Mary. They are the ones that sent me here. But like Caleb, I will walk the hills and valleys of St. Mary West and speak the truth. The people of Western St. Mary demand nothing less. Mr. Speaker, the people have entrusted us with their dreams, goals, and aspirations. I must articulate them here. I have a duty so to do. There is nowhere else I can articulate them. I am being pressured, but I will resist. Mr. Speaker, I ask that our banking issues be resolved. Our status towards a republic be clarified. We look forward to an increase in the CDF, better office allowance, and better pay. We need a $20 billion public infrastructure program, better water supplies, roads, and internet. And we need 100% coverage for water and roads. We need to start back the solarization program, establish a housing assistance program, give us more JPs in Western St. Mary, so that in our 60th years, as an independent nation, prosperity can break out in every corner of Western St. Mary. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank you, sir, because it has been a plumb pleasing pleasure to have spoken in this debate. This is Miss Leela Washbelly from Topside Frogwall up at Donnington, saying a big thank you, and Mr. Speaker, if it so pleases you. Thank you, sir.
Member. Member. Thank you for that speech, member from Western St. Mary. House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, just a point of order. The member had raised an issue, which I did yesterday, about the importance of the attendance of the Ministry of Finance to this debate. It is one of the most important functions that we as representatives perform. May I ask you to invite the clerk, just to remind the ministry of their role in this debate and that they should be present, even with the use of technology to accommodate remote attendance. They really ought to be present for the members to be heard properly by the Ministry of Finance.
I have noted the concern of the leader of opposition business, and I'm sure Hansard has taken note of it, and I have taken note of it as the speaker, and I will convey your concerns to be here. The Minister of Finance is not always able to be here, but somebody from Finance will be here. We'll convey your concerns. Our next speaker this afternoon is the member from St. Catherine Southeastern, Mr. Robert Montague. Mr. Robert Miller.
Madam Speaker, I rise in this honorable house to give my second presentation. I want to continue to thank God for leading me and giving me the breath, and for guiding me daily in this unknown purpose that He has for my life. I'm guided by Luke 2, verse 52, which states, "And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man." Madam Speaker, let me thank you for giving me this opportunity. To the Most Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Michael Holness, the great leader of the great Jamaica Labour Party, for the confidence reposed in me and the opportunity to be the people's representative in St. Catherine Southeastern. I continue to express my gratitude to my extended family, the people of St. Catherine Southeastern.
for their confidence, their commitment, and patience that they have showered me with. To my counselor, Councillor Corney Edwards, and my 4 councillors in waiting, the management team, executive, divisional executive, workers of this great constituency, I say thanks to you all. Let me acknowledge I will say to you, continue to hold my hand as I strive to be the best representative that I can be. To Ms. Andrea Smith, my office manager, and Mr. Brown, for the work that you have been given to me, I thank you. Last but certainly not least, my beautiful wife for 15 marvelous years. Kristen and my son Liam Drayson, my silent cheerleaders, for giving me permission to pursue my passion, to serve the beautiful people of Southeast St. Catherine. I thank you both. We aspire, Madam Speaker, for a vibrant constituency that contribute to national development. We expect that education and training will be the vehicle of social upliftment and community transformation. For years, Madam Speaker, I have advocated for Bridgeport High School to be removed from the shift system. Expressed my concern in my last sectoral debate. I had intensive meeting with the Honorable Minister of Education and Youth, and I'm proud to announce today that from those meetings, we are one step closer of removing one of the premier high schools in Jamaica from the shift system. The ministry, Madam Speaker, through NET, will be building a new block to accommodate the growing student population. We humbly ask that the Portmore Municipal Council, for its consideration to waive the attached fees and taxes as we are waiting for that piece of approval to commence work. Let me turn your attention, Madam Speaker, to Portmore Community College. The Portmore Community College is the only tertiary institution in the constituency, but it's bursting at its seams and has overlived its capacity to function. I am very pleased to announce that from the same meeting with the Honourable Minister of Education and Youth, work should commence soon on the new building that will host the premier tertiary institution in Portmore. The Waterford and Southborough primary schools are both leaking. They have leaking issues that need to be resolved, and these, I can assure you, will be given the attention in this academic year. Madam Speaker, on April 1st, 2022, we received a sad news of 8-year-old Dilshan McLean, who was hit by a Toyota Iase bus just outside the Bridgeport Primary School. I must say plans are fast-tracked to fence the school that is needed to ensure that our students are safe. Thanks to Minister Williams and her team, again, let me take this opportunity to give condolences to the family and friends of little McLean. Madam Speaker, over $8 million have been spent on tertiary grants, book vouchers, computers, tablets to residents of the great constituency since the start of this financial year. Special thanks to Brand New Start Foundation, who secured some musical instrument through Chase for all 3 high schools within the constituency, in particular Bridgeport, Waterford, and Cumberland High School. Madam Speaker, their visual arts team did receive a boost, as the donation will enhance their capacity. I also want to thank the Minter Foundation for their yearly back-to-school treat in Waterford, complementing mine on August 21st. Both treats, Madam Speaker, was indeed a success. We continue to place strong emphasis on education skill training in St. Catharines Southeast as we continue as a constituency to build stronger together. Madam Speaker, it's first in the history of St. Catharines Southeast that so many persons from this constituency are being accepted for work on the farm work program. Since 2021, approximately 1,747 persons from the constituency have left on this program. And for this financial year thus far, approximately 30. Madam Speaker, I want to thank Minister Samuda and his team for giving us information and for their generosity to the people for an opportunity to generate their livelihood. Madam Speaker, the constituency was buzzing with activities this past Labor Day. We visited and assisted in total 7 local organizations from the constituency, including Citizen Association with their initiatives on that day. We painted buildings, schools, curb walls, debushing, and even assisted with beautification project with elderly couples' home in Edgewater. Our main project, Madam Speaker, was the pavement of an area in Windermere Crescent, Cumberland. While campaigning, the citizens complained bitterly about the dust nuisance and how they had to close their windows because of the state of affairs of their surroundings. With the resources that were made available through the CDF and from private donations, we made this pavement of the area a reality. Madam Speaker, not only did we pave the area, but the masons and the laborers who worked on the project were also certified through Hartrust NTA. Today, Madam Speaker, they are boasting with pride to their friends, and they are now certified. This is itself generated a buzz in the constituency, as this has increased interest to learning a skill through heart, and as many persons from the constituency has registered with the organization and currently undergoing training. Madam Speaker, we empower lives as we build stronger together. Madam Speaker, the constituency was decorated to welcome the Jamaica 60th independence as a nation under God. We decorated the major towns in all 5 electoral divisions, which lifted the pride of the people. It was a great feeling apart from the experience faced in the Waterford division. Madam Speaker, this type of practice should never repeat itself in the history of our country. This type of politics has no place in the constituency, and especially in our modern-day Jamaica. Madam Speaker, there is still a vexed issue with sewage in the constituency. We continue to have at least 3 collapses weekly. This has proven to be a health crisis, and which has deprived the citizens of their right in peace and harmony in their homes. We ask that the asbestos pipes in the constituency be removed. Plans, Madam Speaker, should be crafted in this financial year budget, as this is a priority. Also, Madam Speaker, there are 4 communities which are slated to be redeveloped through the Prime Minister's initiative of infrastructure upgrade for the first 100 developments under the National Housing Trust. The communities are Westmead, Westchester, Cumberland, Portsmouth. These communities, Madam Speaker, road network needs resurfacing. And I would encourage that before we resurface these roadways, that the aging sewage pipes be removed and replaced. Madam Speaker, so you go on. I'm proud to announce that constituents have seen a high level of water supplies within their pipes. And we would want things to remain that way, or even better. I have had intensive meeting with the ministers, chairman of the National Water Commission, regional director, and even the president about the resurfacing of the roads as they have dug them up for some time now. Madam Speaker, it's a burning issue, and we ask the National Water Commission to reinstate the roads that was dug up after they repair the pipes. Madam Speaker, the list is long and cannot be read out today, but we encourage them to fix it so the citizens can live in peace and harmony. Madam Speaker, a small community in the constituency by the name of Garvey-Mead, a beautiful community with some of the best people in the world. It is a well-hidden treasure. Residents of some of the world's greatest, in particular, Carl Bradshaw, aka Sonny Bradshaw. The area is lacking in infrastructure like roads and parks. Madam Speaker, over 47 years, the roads have not been resurfaced, which is actually the jurisdiction of the municipal council. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to announce that this year, Block N and O were resurfaced. Madam Speaker, this was made possible not by the municipal council, but through funding that was provided last December for road patching by the Most Honorable Prime Minister of Jamaica and the Minister of Finance. It was made possible. Madam Speaker, I must pause to thank, in his absence, Minister without portfolio in charge of works, Everall Clifford Warmington, for his stewardship and insight. Madam Speaker, I went knocking on his door and spoke to him about some roads that were in dire need of repair. Again, all these roads were responsibilities of the municipal council. The roads in question are Waterford Parkway, Portmore Drive, and Cumberland Road. Madam Speaker, making access easy, I'm proud to announce today that because of Ministers Warmington's assistance, we were able to resurface these roads. I want to publicly thank the Minister of Local Government and Rural and Community Development, Honorable Desmond Mackenzie, and former Minister, my colleague and friend who started before me, Robert Montague, for some allocations that were given for some zinc fence removal. Madam Speaker, As you can see, Mandela Avenue in the division of Westchester was identified. Zinc fences were removed. Wall structures erected. The area was debushed. Extra garbage was collected. And this in itself brought a level of pride to the citizens of Mandela Avenue. This, Madam Speaker, is a collective effort building communities stronger together. Madam Speaker, we have a few informal settlements within the constituency. It's my wish to ensure that the citizens of the constituency own their piece of the rock. Mandela Avenue residents have started paying their money for their land. However, there are still areas in the constituency that needs to be regularized. Discussion has started with the Ministry of Housing. West Indies Home Contractors Limited, the owner of majority of these available lands in the constituency. They are prepared to turn over these lands to the ministry because of my intervention. All I'm asking, Madam Speaker, is for the implementation and the partnership with the Ministry of Housing to develop these projects through the social housing program. This, Madam Speaker, will enhance lives of the citizens that I serve. Areas in questions: Portmore Gardens, Princess, you know it, Penway, Merkel Way, 48, Land, Nigel, and parts of Portmore Lane. Citizens, Madam Speaker, are desirous to live up to their responsibility. However, they want the dialogue and the engagement and the assistance to take place and the will to make this a reality. Madam Speaker, this is building foundation and life together to make it stronger. Madam Speaker, 3 consultations were had with the Urban Development Corporation. Work will commence soon on the Resilient Park. This will be a state-of-the-art facility on the parcel of land that is adjacent to Portmore Mall. I have been lobbying for this before I became Member of Parliament. Madam Speaker, I presented the ideas to the UDC, and I'm happy to hear in the Most Honourable Prime Minister's sectoral presentation in March in this Parliament for this year that ground will break for the start of the Resilient Park. Madam Speaker, I have met with some individuals who would like to develop all the green areas in the constituency. We are at a preliminary stage in the discussions, but things are looking good from my standpoint. And it is our plan to ensure that we have at least one green area in every community that families can enjoy. Madam Speaker, it is without doubt St. Catherine Southeastern will be a model constituency to live, work, and raise family as we build together stronger. Madam Speaker, I'm honored and humbled to have been served and selected to be a part of the Joint Select Committee for Portmore to be the 15th parish. I encourage the citizens of Portmore not to fear this breakthrough development, as this will be a win-win for all. Madam Speaker, we have heard the critiques which have not gone on deaf ears, however, most of which is not a prerequisite for Portmore to obtain parish status. However, we encourage the power that be to move hastily for additional amenities to be placed for the benefit of the people of Portmore. We encourage the Municipal Council to start doing some work to identify a suitable area, to speak to the citizens and select a fitting area for a state-of-the-art market for all. That's right. We would welcome the Minister of Transport to look at properties available to place a state-of-the-art Island Traffic Authority examination depot to cater to the citizens as we anticipate a Class A hospital that was promised by the most honorable Prime Minister, and also the relocation of the Waterford Health Centre, which has outgrown its capacity as we bring good customer service to the elderly, especially in that vicinity. Madam Speaker, lands were identified. A proposal was written to National Health Fund, and I got wind that it's being discussed currently at the board level. I am anticipating the relocation of the Waterford Health Centre. Yeah. Madam Speaker, we deserve Portmore as the 15th parish of Jamaica, the first parish that will be selected as a people, and most citizens like myself are of the view that we can handle our own affairs. Madam Speaker, we are steadfast as a people and will work stronger together. I have been in discussion with the Minister of National Security, Honorable Horace Chang, and Minister of State, Xavier Main, in regards to the Waterford and the Bridgeport substations. Both areas are in dire need of attention, so the hard-working officers can work in better working conditions. As I continue to lobby for more resources in form of boots on the ground, bicycle patrol, motor vehicles and bikes, I need to remind the citizens that each of us have a part to play with this fight against crime. Madam Speaker, let us be an informer for a better Jamaica. That's right. That's right. Let us be our brother's keeper. That's right. As we will curtail this monster of crime and violence in our communities. Yes. Madam Speaker, I must commend the community of Garvey for their reintroduction of the Community Neighborhood Watch. Yes. It was a good relaunch. Let us use this opportunity to encourage other communities to revamp their neighborhood watch, install CCTV cameras on their homes, and connect it to Jamaica Eye. Yes. Replicate what some of the residents did in Garvey Mead. This in itself will deter criminals and assist with protecting our space and communities. Madam Speaker, criminals must know that there is no place for them in St. Catherine Southeastern. Right. We are losing too many of our brothers and sisters, and we refuse to lose anymore. Madam Speaker, I wrote a letter to the Sports Development Commission and in sports about the deplorable state of the Edgewater Sports Complex, Garvey Mead playfield, and the Bridgeport High School playfield, which has been banned for over 9 years by ISA. I will continue to lobby for these facilities as we believe that sports play an integral role in the development of the holistic human being, and these facilities are in dire need. Madam Speaker, preliminary discussions have started with the Minister of Sports and Culture, Minister of Sports, Culture, Entertainment and Gender Affairs, Honorable Olivia Bobs-Grange, and our State Minister, Orlando Terrelong. Thank you very much. To transform Jam World into a mini stadium and an entertainment zone. Madam Speaker, additional meetings will be had in the coming weeks The constituency is excited about this facility, and we envision that work will start shortly. It will be a plus for the citizens of Portmore and Jamaica at large. Next year, January, Madam Speaker, we will resume our interdivisional sports extravaganza that will unite the communities and its people. Madam Speaker, we will continue to eat, drink, cry, laugh, and play together as we build stronger together as a family. Madam Speaker, we understand that the current administration hands are tied in regards to the yearly increase of the toll cost. Yes. We understand that Trans-Jamaica Highway, east to west, must receive their return on investment. Madam Speaker, I've written to the Minister of Transport and Mining about some recommendations, one of which is renegotiated. Thank you very much. Yes, I had a tongue tie a while ago. The contract that was signed by then administration. Over this side, Madam Speaker, we believe the contract was inconsiderate and erroneous to the people of the constituency and citizens of Portmore in particular. I have been in dialogue with the Minister. We hope, Madam Speaker, that this vexed issue will be resolved sooner than later. We use this opportunity to encourage the toll operators to sit around the table as we come up with solutions in which everyone benefits. Madam Speaker, we understand that there was a shortage of buses in the system. We also got some great news that over 100 buses were placed in the system for the start of this academic year. However, additional, that's what I said, additional. I want to thank you for that, Minister Shaw and State Minister Hutchinson.
Great work.
We're having issues, Madam Speaker. The current 3 and 3/8 serves, that's a bus route, serves Christian Penn, Christian Gardens, Amington Gardens, Gregor Park, Caymanas Gardens, Passage Fort, Waterford, Portsmouth, Westchester, then to the toll, to Kingston or Half a Tree. The volume of commuters, Madam Speaker, on these routes far exceeds the allocation of buses assigned on the routes, and therefore causes great delay to our people going to work, school, church, or their general business. Madam Speaker, we need to reintroduce the 7, which comes from downtown to Half a Tree, which serve those going to Portmore Mall, Westchester, Passage Fort, Portsmouth, and then into Waterford. If then returned via the toll to Kingston or Half a Tree. You see, Madam Speaker, after the 3 and the 3A.
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the standing orders be suspended to enable the member to continue his speech to its conclusion, notwithstanding the time limit on speeches.
Members, the question before the House is that the member be given sufficient time to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Member, you may.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thanks for the renegotiating. Thank you very much. You see, Madam Speaker, the 3 and the 3A, when it does all its turn, and by the time it reaches Waterford, it is packed to capacity, and it deprives the residents of Waterford, some of which would have to walk from third world or fourth world all the way to the top, because sometimes because of the nature of the capacity of the buses, they don't enter into Waterford, which deprive the citizens. So, Minister, please think about reintroducing the 7 to the Portmore route. I bring to your attention, Madam Speaker, some issues that I've been having in Portmore. Ever since I was elected to serve the people of St. Catherine Southeastern, some persons, I would like to say, try to sabotage the process and the prosperity of the people. Madam Speaker, I am resolute, and I'm elected by the people to serve, and I will serve them. Madam Speaker, I have no plan to leave the people of Southeast anytime soon. So I ask those persons who try to sabotage things that I try to implement in the constituency, come on board, because the country, we are moving far from that type of politics. Let us work together to ensure that we bring prosperity to the people of St. Catherine Southeastern. Madam Speaker, I bring your attention to my final point on an issue that my colleague spoke about earlier. The issue of customer service. Madam Speaker, the 2 major commercial banks in Portmore have both gone cashless. Both gone cashless. Just yesterday, a constituent went to lodge some money into his account, and he was refused because it was not over $150,000. Madam Speaker, both banks have gone cashless. This has placed a stress on the elderly in the constituency who has to stand up in line in the rain, in the sun, who refuse to go online in the Sunshine City with a limit amount on withdrawal daily. They would have to traverse to Kingston or Spanish Town to get a withdrawal. This, I believe, is inconsiderate and needs to be addressed. Also, Madam Speaker, Jamaica Public Service has decided to pull their plugs. They have moved out like a thief in the night from Portmore. They have turned off their lights. The only office in Portmore. Madam Speaker, this is not right. Again, we are forcing constituents to traverse to Spanish Town or Kingston to conduct their business with JPS. This is unjust. And I encourage the banks to give better customer service, listen to the cry of the people, and JPS to turn the lights on again in Portmore. Madam Speaker, as God has afforded me this opportunity to serve with pride, the people of St. Catherine Southeastern, I ask that he will, my friend Sir Paulwell,
yes, tell him about that challenge mark this weekend.
That he will go before me
Let Mark stay
and guide me
yes.
He will stay behind me to lift me even when I fall. That he will stay beside me and continue to whisper in my ears. Stay within me to sustain me, to keep me grounded with humility, and to stay over me, to watch me as I go. Madam Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity. I thank the beautiful people of St. Catherine Southeastern. May God bless this house. May God bless my beautiful family members. And may God bless Jamaica and my colleagues. May God bless my colleagues. May God bless the most honorable Prime Minister. May God bless Jamaica, land we love.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the members for their presentations today, and I now ask that the debate be suspended.
Members, the question before the House is that the debate be suspended. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The debate is now suspended.
Madam Speaker, it's not contemplated for us to do any further business today. I therefore ask that the House adjourns until Tuesday, September 20, 2022 at 2 p.m. Madam Speaker, I just want to indicate that next week the debate will continue and we will have presentations from Member of Parliament Tamika Davis, Hanover West, MP Rhoda Crawford, Manchester Central, Michael Phillips, Manchester Northwest, Dr. Norman Dunn, St. Mary Southeast, Anne-Marie Vaz, Portland East, and Robert Chin, Manchester Southern. We have a full week next week. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask now that the House be adjourned.
Members, the question before the House is that we do adjourn until next week, Tuesday, the 20th at 2 p.m. And I ask that all members place in their diary what the House Leader just said. We have a full slate of speakers and we must start Parliament at 2 p.m. sharp.
Madam Speaker, if I could, I just want to indicate to members who are making presentations in the debate that they should provide advance copies to the Leader of the House and to the Clerk and the Speaker of the House prior to their presentations. And and of course, I'm asking that the protocol be observed. Thank you.
Thank you, House Leader. So, members, the question before the House is that we do adjourn until next week, Tuesday the 20th at 2 p.m. sharp. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. This House is now adjourned.